Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Asia Scotland Institute's new student-led podcast series. My name is Eleanor Channer. I'm an intern at the ASI, and I'm joined here today by Yaling Jiang, the founder of newsletter Following the UN and ApertureChina, which advises foreign businesses on the Chinese consumer market. Welcome, Yaling. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Hi, Eleanor. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So, Yaling, your newsletter focuses on consumerism and popular social trends in China and on Chinese social media. So, in light of one of your recent articles on a series of Chinese commercial trends that appear to have begun to spread internationally, today we'll be discussing soft power. Is China becoming cool? So, in this article, you begin by discussing the recent Labubu trend to demonstrate how Chinese soft power is evolving. To give listeners a bit of background, could you explain what a Labubu is, what the trend is, and why it's become so popular?
Sure. Labubu is this ugly looking doll produced by Chinese toy maker Pop Mart. The origin of I don't think many people know the origin of the doll. It's originated from the Monster series, which was created by a Hong Kong illustrator. And the Hong Kong illustrator grew up in the Nordic region, so a lot of his inspirations come from Nordic myth. However, when he created the doll and it was produced by Pop Mart, it got picked up by Lisa, who is a member of K-pop band Blackpink. I personally think that, and I think many people also believe that that is when Labubu and Pop Mart really breaks the ceiling of communications and publicity within Asia and breaks the ceiling to the Western world as well, because Lisa is a global phenomenon. She has around 80 million fans on Instagram. And
Wow.
after Lisa talked about it in a celebrity video, she talked about how Pop Mart and Miniso, I think, being her favorite shops, and she featured a toy of Labubu in the Vanity Fair interview. It started, I think, this trend, first of all, among the celebrity circles. So not just her fans, but celebrities including the Beckham's family, Dua Lipa, Rihanna, all got their own Labubu. And think about all the power and spending power these celebrities can yield. And that's why we're seeing this global phenomenon of Labubu being the most popular toy and best-selling toy.
Okay. Wow. So in this article you draw is two key points that you've both of which you've just mentioned. So one of them is how Chinese companies can sort of deploy their sort of publicity strategies both inside and outside China. You just mentioned within the kind of Asian market generally, and the other is in terms of soft power and a means of influencing other countries through attraction and persuasion as opposed to sort of hard power which relies on force or coercion. So if we start with maybe publicity, commercial publicity strategies, you use the phrase in your article, ambiguity is good, ambiguity is safe. So what do you mean by that? And how do in practice, how do Chinese companies deploy their publicity strategies within China or outside China?
That's a great question. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start unpacking from the beginning. My newsletter is mainly focused on consumer trends and the commercial context, but having been a journalist in China and having kind of faced daily censorship and getting propaganda orders from editors where I was working in the state media system, I'm also fully aware how Chinese companies' publicity strategies can be influenced by also the state media strategy, meaning that within China, they need to use a tone that aligns themselves with state media and with national goals. And in the context of Labubu, that will be China's soft power, that will be made in China is cool, that is Guo Chao, which means China's chic, and everyone's buying goods that's created in China, designed in China, and also made in China. Chinese consumers are very proud to see the success of Chinese companies. So that is what we call, I think, 内宣, like the tone of internal publicity. But when it comes to outside of China, and external strategies should look very different. You can also see maybe slight differences in the likes of CGTN and China Daily positions themselves. And saying Chinese companies also know that if they reinforces on Chinese identities too much, and it may go the opposite way
Hmm.
among the target audience. You cannot really strengthen China's interest and the Chinese identity too much. So outside China, I think they're trying to play down the fact that it's made by a Chinese company, that it's created by, yeah, it's made in China. So they're trying to play it down. So just from journalist friends, I know that they are very hesitant to take English interviews
Hmm.
because that will also get distributed within like the English information channel. So they would prefer to talk about how cool it is to be Chinese in Chinese language, but they would much rather connect it to Labubu's global popularity and all these celebrities within the English uh, sphere.
Hmm. And are there any sort of other particular companies apart from Labubu that come to mind when you think of these publicity strategies abroad?
Yes, I would say so. But it really depends on what goods and services these Chinese companies try to sell. If they sell, for example, electronics, we have some examples. There's a brand, iPhone, which produce really good hair dryers, and they're now venturing into electronic toothbrush. They are seen as dupes or cheaper alternative of Dyson.
Hmm.
And they have been quite successful in Southeast Asia and also in North America. And we have another example, Anchor. I think many people only realize Anchor is Chinese when someone on Twitter pointed out that the power bank Trump was using at a certain press briefing is Anchor and is from China. I think that was the only big moment when people realized, oh, Anchor is Chinese. But before that, they also they've been hiding pretty well as a global company, not just a Chinese company. So I've just discussed like what electronics companies would do. I think they would usually call themselves global companies, also play down where it's manufactured, where headquarters is based. But when it comes to food and beverage products or even in beauty, where one of the selling points is being Chinese, for example, Chinese food, Chinese milk tea, or as we see in London, one of the biggest Lao Zihao, it's like time owner brand in China, Songhelou has come to London. I think in that context, it's really important to play up the Chinese roots because that's why people come to you. They want to have an authentic Chinese experience. In the other consumer sectors, it's quite rare, but I've also seen the Chinese beauty brand Floris's also I think playing into the Chinese vibes because their design and aesthetics is very Chinese. So those are some examples.
Okay, brilliant. So if we take that as sort of the publicity side of things, we then think of it more in terms of soft power. I suppose this brings up the question in your article, which was, is Labubu Chinese and does it matter? And I suppose that's something you've just talked about with all these different companies. Are their products Chinese? Do they make them appear more Chinese, less Chinese? And so, how do you think that plays out in terms of soft power as well as a commercial marketing strategy?
Mm. I think, first of all, I think every Chinese company is dying to get their products be like the Labubu. Every Chinese company is aspire to produce the or seek the next Labubu. But what happened to the Labubu is very incidental. Without Lisa, I would say that its popularity and success is very much was held within Asia.
Mhm.
Um, and having said that, I think when it comes to soft power, with the level of success you get, you have find yourself maybe having different levels of responsibility as well. So for the examples I just mentioned, the live phone anchor, I'm really not sure whether they find themselves to be responsible for China's soft power. But I think I can definitely say for sure that Labubu is having, I think is having close discussions with local or even central government on how they can further the effect of Labubu to help China's soft power. Even if they're not in discussion, I think that's what Chinese regulators are thinking. They also see this as a very unique phenomenon. That's why they are basically, I think they're using Labubu as an anchor to also crack down on China's IP thefts because as Labubu got popular, there are also a lot of counterfeiters. There are a lot of people who are trying to smuggle Labubu across the borders, and I'm seeing the regulators and also the customs acting on it in a harsh way that I've never seen before.
Okay. And then if you take a couple of other recent examples, so the American YouTuber I ShowSpeed visited China in I think April, and
Mhm.
the recent anime film Ne Zha was also released this year. Is what is it? Is it the celebrity status with Labubu that you think that's helped kind of push it um beyond the success of something like Ne Zha? What is it that's really made Labubu kind of stand out on the global stage?
Sorry, did you say what made Labubu or IShowSpeed?
Both, either.
Both. Okay. Um, well, I think a lot of people, the industry insiders and also commentators are disappointed to see how poorly Ne Zha 2 performed outside of China, but it makes a lot of sense because it was very information dense
Hmm.
in their script. And if you weren't born in China, you won't get a lot of references. I think even to be able to get a storyline, which is about a mystic creator in ancient China, you have to do a lot of readings. So I don't think they should expect people to do that just to be able to enjoy a cartoon film. I think that's a lot to ask. So I don't think, yeah, I wouldn't say Ne Zha has helped a lot in China's soft power. But when it comes to actual speed, I think what made actual speed so popular was not because I don't think the Chinese regulators see it in the way that I see, because from their perspective, it could be like, oh, we finally have this American influencer coming to us. We need to work closely, even more closely with him and work closely with other YouTube stars because that's what they've been doing. They've been doing a lot of paid and sponsored content with influencers within and outside China or from outside China. I think what made HSBC really, really popular is because of his transparency, especially at the beginning of his tour. So for those um, aren't familiar, he came to China, I think, early this year and visited, I think, about 8 Chinese cities. And he live streamed all across the tour, which is very, very rare. I think it's unprecedented even for people to live stream everything because that means whenever he walks on the street and he gets a reaction from passersby, it's real and it's unfiltered. I think that's what made his
Mhm.
live streams and his tour so popular. But in the later stage of the tour, I could see so much intervention from local propaganda department, for example, having a local Chinese businessman to join their dinner or having scheduled itineraries to this state TV station. I see a lot of intervention, and I don't think they really get the point. If if the audience only going to see itineraries that are planned or reviewed by propaganda department, which is what usually happens, then why do people watch it in the first place? Why don't people just watch Chinese state media? So as of today, I'm hearing that more YouTube stars are coming to China and are doing their China tour, and I really hope the regulators can learn their lesson. I don't think they will, but let's see how they all play out.
Yeah, yeah, it's that kind of that organic, natural, transparent part that's what makes people want to watch it, definitely.
Yes.
Um, and then I was also wondering more kind of broadly. You also point out in you argue in your article that Donald Trump's policies have also been a large contributor to China's soft power. What do you think of the reasons for that? How does that relate to the role of these sort of social trends?
Well, I think um I feel like I don't have to explain it to a lot of people who are already thinking about the fall of America's soft power in the last few years, especially not to the audience of ASI. But I think America used to be this moral compass or spiritual beacon of citizens around the world and institutions around the world because it holds its values so dear and it acts on it. Not in every aspect, but I have to say, in liberal arts and humanities, which was what I studied, I would say America is the best. But in most recent years, especially in Trump's second term, I can see how he's intentionally trying to damage the value of higher education by starting a war with Ivy Leagues, and also just like his personal values and the kind of role model he's being for male and just like young people around the world. I think not just me, but I think a lot of people are disappointed in America. People start calling America as a second China, or I mean, me as a Chinese national can definitely see resemblances in how the presidents act in censorship and in politics, in what kind of dictators they can be. So people are disappointed in America, to say the least. Um, Having said that, I think China, on the other hand, I think Xi Jinping is a quite low profile person. After after he became president, I don't think he cares so much about what people think of him anymore. Because I think over 10 years ago, you could still see a lot of publicity stunts of him drinking a beer in the UK, playing football.
Yeah,
I think
do you mean
that.
international opinion?
An international opinion, I think so, especially about him as a person. I think Trump is still very much in people's face. Yeah, just showing a lot of his personality. And in this very, like when if we're just comparing these two and also how the projections of the national images of China and US, I can definitely see like when people are getting disappointed in the US, they naturally turn to another superpower in the world, that is China. And I think that is also um, intertwined with like what we discussed about a lot of the content that young people are consuming these days. I think that's why we saw that recently Pew, according to Pew Research Center, young people especially favor China, or there is, I mean, the sentiment has slightly gone up.
Mm. And so why do you think kind of soft power these social trends matter? You know, we have these global summits for world leaders where they'll discuss trade, security, climate change, all these big topics. But why are these social trends so important?
These social trends are important because sometimes they are people's only touch points to China. For like any regular British person, they would not know China's policies on climate change or on business, on live stream, unless they work in the sector. They have no incentive or motivation to learn about what other things China are doing. But when it comes to social trends and online content, whether in short or long video form, they I think that's the most useful tool to help shape an audience perception of a certain issue, certain country.
Yeah. And so when you is that sort of what you're referring to when you close your article with the phrase transparency at the government level and ambiguity at the business level?
So I so the phrase was written because I think the government can do so much more to make China a more appealing place, or just a not normal place for other countries. One thing that's very close to my heart that I always want to advocate for is they should really allow Chinese nationals to work for foreign publications under byline because if Chinese people can't write their own stories for English publications, why would you expect someone else who doesn't understand China, who doesn't speak language, to tell nuanced stories about you? I just don't think it makes sense. But I also understand that this is very low priority for them. They would rather having control of what's being said, who is able to say all those things, instead of allowing nuances to happen. Because China has a very different view on journalism than the rest of the world. I think journalism in China is only like telling good stories, meaning stories with positive sentiment about the topic. And that is not how journalism is viewed by the rest of the world, I think. And when I say, so that's what I mean by transparency. Another layer of transparency is data. So a prime example is the youth unemployment rate, which we know stopped publishing 2 years ago after it hit record high rates of, I think, something over 21%. Um, so I think the government knew how much attention it had drawn from international society, and they stopped publishing. And after 2 months, after a few months, at the end of I think 2023, they came back with a different set of metrics, and then it was much lower. And I don't think it's done China any good, especially in terms of public image, because when you're not admitting your issues, when you're trying to hide them, it only gives people and other countries more reason to say that you're not being honest. We cannot work with you. And I think that has, I think, affected the business community's confidence in China as well. And when I say ambiguity at the business level, I think depends on the sector, the business in, they should still not hide. I think they can still play with their Chinese identity. They should keep trying because honesty always helps. Um, for example, I recently saw like a cycling gear brand not mentioning China at all in its founder story and in the about page for the English website. It's entered UK already, by the way, and the EU. And it only said that after having been in the cycling apparel industry for a few years, we decided to start the brand in 2022. And I was just like, what are you trying to hide? We know you're based in Shanghai, and why don't you just say you're from Shanghai? Um, so yeah, I think my point is, I think they can still say that they're from a city, they're from a certain region or a certain city, which brings the customer's attention to the region, but not the country, which is far less political. So I think there's definitely ways to do it. And again, I think transparency is always encouraged, but they cannot control the perception of customers. So from a business perspective, I understand their choices in whatever they do.
And so just to bring it back to the title of our podcast, is China becoming cool?
I think it is, and I hope it is. I think it's in my best interest, but I also feel very conflicted. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Yaling. Thank you very much to our listeners for tuning in. You'll be able to find details of Yarling's work on Substack in the podcast description, and look forward to next time. Thank you very much, Yarling.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thanks for having me, ASI.